We're about news, commentary, conversations, truth, liberty, and God. We stand for American values and our flag. We believe that the Constitution is a document that fortifies rights already given to us by our Creator. We will not apologize for our love of God and country, ever. We are Right America Media.
And we can go into some of the books that were removed from what we know as the modern day Bible. You know, when you have certain books that are removed because they don't think that people should have access to this information or know it, you know, why remove a book from a Bible, right? You have the Ethiopian Orthodox text, which has, I think, 88 books of the Bible in total. But in the Ethiopian Orthodox text, it's basically kind of like a mainline OG version of the Bible. And then sometime in the 4th century, there was actually a group that came together and they removed certain books. And well, why would they remove this information? If it's truly, you know, written in part of the oldest Bible in the world, why would they then take it out? The Catholic Bible as well, that also has, they call them Apocrypha texts because the King James Bible doesn't acknowledge them, but there are also other books that are not considered, you know, approved by the King James. So
if you go back to the oldest works of the Bible, weren't most of those stories handed down generation after generation and then eventually written down?
Written into text. Well, some of them are written by prophets and then, but I mean, Enoch is apparently supposed to predate even the time of Genesis. But you have the Ethiopian Orthodox Church that actually, there's Ethiopian Jews. And that's considered the most pure form of the Bible.
Was the Book of Enoch removed from the Bible? That's our question we're continuing to discuss today. This is part 2 of Were Books Removed from the Bible here on POV Scriptura. Thanks for joining us for Season 1. POV Scriptura is going to be running every year, God willing, from the new episodes in the fall and the spring of every year, one season a year. But we do it like a TV show. So that way I can take summer off. I appreciate you guys letting me have summer off. All right, this is the show where we are unashamed to look at issues, whether they're political or biblical or just in the news, just on the scroll as we scroll through social media. And we look at them from a biblical worldview. Keep calm. I'm a professional theologian, and I'm here to help. You can call me a professional theologian if you'd like. I am a paid pastor. I guess that makes me a professional theologian. We're talking about the interview. We've been actually for a few weeks now talking about the interview with Anna Paulina Luna and on the Joe Rogan podcast. And Joe Rogan, I think, again, I've been trying to be very kind to him because I think he did a great job interviewing her. He was skeptical, that kind of stuff. But I think, and I agree with Anna Paulina Luna that demons are probably interdimensional beings. These things that we see that we think are aliens are probably really demons. I talked about that a few weeks ago on the show. But now I'm getting into some of the stuff that I disagree with her about, and it's like laughably bad. Some of the things that she has said. We already talked about how she claims that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church canon has the book of Enoch in it, this book that's not in the Old Testament scriptures of any Bible today, except for the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And this Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims to be the purest form of Christianity. Of course they do, right? Baptists claim to be the purest form of Christianity. Roman Catholics claim to be the purest form of Christianity. Everyone claims to be the purest form of Christianity, okay? So she says that, they claim to be the purest form of Christianity, and they have the Book of Enoch. Why does everyone else not have the Book of Enoch? But understand that the Ethiopian Orthodox canon of Scripture did not come around until the 4th century. And we have many canon lists that different people were saying, hey, I believe these are the books that we know are inspired, and so on and so forth. And none of them include the Book of Enoch before the Ethiopian Orthodox church, and no one today, as far as I know, besides the church structure, besides the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, believes that it is canon today. That's because I'm making the argument, contrary to Ina Paulina Luna, who's claimed that the Book of Enoch was taken out. She obviously had the understanding that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church goes way back before any canon list. It was like the very first canon list. It's not. It's much later, and it clearly added the Book of Enoch. So we're also going to talk about today her claims about the King James Version editing the Bible because King James wanted to get married. I think she's got King James mixed up with King Henry, who left the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, because he wanted an annulment, or at least that's the story. There's more to the story, but that's sort of the part that everyone knows about. That's not King James. I'm not aware of King James wanting a marriage, not being able to have it because he'd already left the Catholic Church, right? Like the Episcopal Church, the Church of England was already there. We're talking a significant amount of time later. The King James was 1611. So we're going to talk about all this and show how she just doesn't know history at all, and yet she talks about history as if she knows it, as if she's got some secret information that no one else knows. And this is why it's so important to me, because I feel like this is very obviously needing to be talked about. So here we go. Let me go to the last clip we played in our last episode, and I'll sort of cue it up a little bit before the end there, so we can see what's being said.
Sorry,
Canon.
5th century.
And why did it get discluded?
It says the Jewish scribes or the priests the rabbis didn't believe it was canon.
Huh.
So it's regarded as scripture.
But what's interesting is that even if that's the case, though, you have the Ethiopian Orthodox Church that actually there's Ethiopian Jews, and that's considered the most pure form of the Bible. So like you actually have a division of like the Ethiopian Jewish class that actually recognized Enoch.
How weird is it that some rabbis 500 years ago made a call?
But that's what I'm saying is like you
1500 years ago,
can't though
made a call.
discredit it because
That's kind of weird.
But you can't discredit it because, again, like when you have people removing books, I think, look, and I'm not telling people what to believe. I'm just saying you should take a look at it.
Okay, we don't have people removing books. If anything, we have people adding books. We talked about that last time, so go back and watch the first episode if you want to. Let's go to the next clip. This one is where she makes the claim that the Book of Revelation replaced the Book of Enoch. That's the story she's heard. Let's let her make this point.
And the story goes that Revelations actually had replaced Enoch. And so it's interesting because when you're looking kind of full circle on, you hear the stuff that some of these people are talking about, and then you see and you read the Book of Enoch, which is a wild read, okay? And then you look at...
The story goes that Revelation replaced Enoch. That's silly. Again, the Book of Enoch was not in any canon list, any lists of people who... okay, so remember that the canon of the Bible is not like something that we get to decide. We have to identify it, right? So God inspired certain books. God inspired authors to write books. And there were other people who also wrote books. There's lots of books in the world. But we need to identify which of those books are inspired by God. We don't get to decide what's canon. We have to identify what is canon. And so the Christian church, from the 1st century, the 3rd, 2nd century, as soon as its inception, is you start seeing canon lists right as soon as the apostles are done writing in the end of the 1st century. In the 2nd century, you start seeing people talking about what belongs in the Bible. The book of Revelation is already talked about. Within 100 years of it being written, Irenaeus is talking about it as scripture. He's one of the early church fathers. So you have the book of Revelation in canon lists already in the 2nd century, the 3rd century. It's not until the 4th century, till the 300s, when you have the Ethiopian canon list coming around, that adds the book of Enoch. So the idea that the book of Revelation replaced the book of Enoch is nonsense. The book of Revelation was in canon lists long before the book of Enoch was added by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. So I don't know where you're getting your information, Anna, but that's just false.
Kind of what our modern day description is of what angels and entities are versus what Enoch was seeing and reporting in his language and ability at that time. I think that there's a lot that brings you to then ask the question, well, why would they remove this information? If it's truly, written in part of the oldest Bible in the world, why would they then take it out?
Well, it's not written in the oldest Bible in the world. That's silly. It's not written. You might find an old copy of an Ethiopian Bible, but in the lists of canon, Ethiopian Orthodox is not the earliest list, not at all. The list of books that belong in the Bible. So the oldest Bible in the world, that's false. It's not. And in fact, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church added it. So don't worry about why they would. The question, why would they take it out, is a nonsense question, since it's clear they didn't take it out. It's clear that the Ethiopian Orthodox.
And so it's interesting because then you have, the evolution of what the King James.
Okay, so I accidentally hit play a little too soon there. But here we go. This is her claiming that the King James Version was rewritten, was meant to rewrite the Bible, take out things you're not supposed to be reading.
And so it's interesting because then you have, the evolution of what the King James Bible is. We all know that story. He wanted to get remarried. They rewrote it. But
we all know that King James wanted to get remarried, so he rewrote the Bible. No, we don't. We don't all know that. That's news to me, Anna Paulina Luna. Because, of course, King James did not rewrite the Bible. This is complete nonsense. And King James didn't need to rewrite the Bible to get remarried if he wanted to get remarried. And what would that have anything to do with taking out the book of Enoch, right? Because, the book of Enoch doesn't say anything about whether you're allowed to get remarried. And neither do any of the other books that are considered apocrypha. I've got my 100-book apocrypha right here. There's a lot of books that are considered, that were like, some people would debate whether they belong in the Bible, but they're actually not, and so they're called apocrypha, which means not belonging in the Bible. So anything that King James did in the Bible would have been inconsequential if it was all about getting married. But you're getting that mixed up with King Henry. And let's just make sure I get Henry the Eighth. Yeah, of course it's the Eighth. Henry the Eighth was a king who was the king during the Reformation. And he did want to leave the Catholic Church because they wouldn't give him an annulment on his marriage, and he wanted to get married again because he couldn't have a son. And he was a pretty bad king. And so he broke from the Roman Church and established the Episcopal Church, or the Church of England, because he wanted to get remarried. That was not King James. It was much, much later, in the 1600s, when King James issued the translation of the Bible into English again. They already had the Geneva Bible, which was a really good translation of the Bible into English. But King James didn't like the Geneva Bible because the Geneva Bible had a bunch of notes in it. And the notes were they were notes like in Romans 13, where it says we are to obey authorities because authorities operate on behalf of God. And the note said, yeah, but make sure you don't obey authorities when they disobey God, and you have the right to rebel and all this stuff. And King James didn't like that. He was dealing with an issue where people were Puritans were leaving the Church of England and rebelling against the Church of England, and he didn't want to encourage that in the copy of the Bible. So he issued the King James Version, which was going to translate the Bible almost exactly. I mean, it's very similar to not almost exactly, but very similar. There's no meaningful difference between the King James translation and the Geneva Bible, which was already a translation into English. They teach the same things. A few words here and a few words there. Okay. But they teach exactly the same thing. And the Geneva Bible was already around when the King James was translated. And the King James translation was mainly so that King James would have a Bible that didn't have the notes in the margin that the Geneva Bible did. And the Puritans, who didn't like King James running the church, kept on using the Geneva Bible anyway. They refused to use the King James because the King James they thought was the king's way to keep them subjugated, and so they were kind of rabble rousers there. Okay, so let me play for you again this statement that we just heard her make, and none of it is true. Like, oh, we all know this, she said, but none of this is true.
And so it's interesting because then you have, the evolution of what the King James Bible is. We all know that story. He wanted to get remarried. They rewrote it.
He wanted to get remarried, so he rewrote the Bible. Well, it seems to match really, really well with the English versions and every other Bible that we have, like the ancient manuscripts and everything. It matches exactly. I mean, he rewrote the Bible and he didn't bother to touch any passage at all about marriage and change it even a little bit. And he wanted to get remarried. This is not historically. This is so far away from being historically accurate. It is laughable, and it's frustrating too because people are going to listen to this, watch this, and not know that it's completely false.
But you even have the Catholic Bible that has it's what happened.
Joe's laughing about it. She's like, it's what happened. It's what happened. No, it's definitely not. It's definitely not what happened.
Right.
And you have the Catholic Bible that had books that were taken out, and then we have the King James. And so it's interesting
The Catholic Bible has books that were taken out, she says. The Catholic Bible has books that are taken out. Okay, so this is actually kind of correct. So the Roman Catholic Church has a list of books that are the Deuterocanon. I can read them to you here from my copy of 100 books that are considered apocrypha. The Deuterocanon would be like the Prayer of Manasseh, the first book of Esdras, the book of Tobit, Judith, First and Second Maccabees. Okay, so there's the Wisdom of Solomon, those kind of things. There is a list of books that the Catholic Church considers the Deuterocanon, where the Protestant Church recognizes 66 books. The Catholic Church recognizes more books. Now, I think the Protestant Church is correct about that. But since King James was a Protestant, he obviously, when he translates to English, the translators, he didn't translate it, by the way. He commissioned translators to do it. And his only rule for them was, don't put notes in there that are going to make me mad. Okay, so they're going to include a list of books, not exactly the same as the Deuterocanon from the Catholic Church, but they include a list of books, including many of the Deuterocanon books, and they call them apocrypha because they're still in the Bible, right? They're still listed in the Bible, but they're just listed under the note. These are not inspired, but they're good and useful. You can go around and read them, and they're helpful. So, as a Protestant, they were actually quite, like Protestant translations wouldn't necessarily have the Deuterocanon in them, but the King James translation was actually quite generous to these books, putting them in, but calling them apocrypha. So again, this isn't really taking out the books because the King James translation didn't take out the books, or at least not all. There's a few books that are different between the Deuterocanon and the Apocrypha in the King James translation. The problem, actually, I think the confusion here probably comes from quite a while later. During the American colonies, they for a while, you had the American colonies, they break from England, all this kind of stuff. They have a hard time getting the Bible. They have to print their own Bibles, and it becomes very expensive to buy a Bible. It really kind of always was. And I forget which society. There was a society in America that wanted to get the Bible to people. It might have been the American Bible Society. I don't know. I might be just making that up. But there is a society. They wanted to get the Bible to people, and they actually printed the Bible, but they took out that in order to make it cheaper to print, because back then it was a lot. It was very expensive to print. They took out the Apocrypha, they took out the marginal notes, they took out the introduction to the readers, all the extras, and just gave what we have in our Bibles today. And so when you pick up a Bible today that says King James, it probably doesn't have the Apocrypha, it probably doesn't have marginal notes, it probably doesn't have all that stuff, because it became sort of the American version of the Bible is without that. That's how it got into so many homes and why people were so familiar with it. And it's not important. You guys can look that up. But the point is that this wasn't the King James taking anything out. It just over time, the King James versions we have today don't have the Apocrypha. Again, not taken out. If anything, again, this doesn't include the Book of Enoch. That's separate. But the Book of Enoch was certainly added by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and then the Deuterocanon or the Apocrypha, those are two different lists but very similar lists of books, was not taken out. Protestants didn't really accept it anyway.
Very few people could even read back then. Very few people could write, right? So you're not going to write. You're probably going to try to capture a truth. You're probably not writing necessarily to deceive people and make up a story. So the question is, with all this stuff, is like, what was the original truth that they were trying to write down, and how much of it is getting distorted by translations from.
So here Joe Rogan is asking a good question. How much
ancient.
He's saying, why did they write it down? They were obviously trying to convey some truth. That's his conclusion. Clearly, they must have been trying to convey something true. Well, that's not necessarily the case, Joe. We have lots of ancient forgeries in ancient manuscripts, people who pretend to be something they're not. They're actually pretty easy to spot, which is how we know that the Book of Enoch wasn't written till much later. Because the Book of Enoch has a prediction that God will end all things and judge the whole world 70 generations after the time of Enoch. Guess what 70 generations after time of Enoch is? Right when we see the first copies of the Book of Enoch start showing up. Okay, so it would be if 30 years a generation, you got 2,100 years from the time of Enoch. You're going to be right around Second Temple Judaism. We're talking about right kind of in between the Old Testament and the New Testament, that kind of a period of time, right before Jesus came and all that kind of stuff. They were writing this down and saying, "Aha, Jesus is coming back in 70." Not Jesus. They didn't believe in Jesus, but God is going to come and judge the whole world 70 generations after Enoch. Right now, guess what? It never happened. But obviously, it was written before that time. These are the types of things that kind of help us date the Book of Enoch. It was written by people during the time when they were expecting him to come very soon. So they said 70 generations. Here we go. They could have said 7,000 years. They could have said anything, but they said 70 generations because that so happened to fall on their time. Of course, God didn't come at that time. They also said things. They also used names of places like Enoch. Supposedly Enoch says in the Book of Enoch, I went to the region of Dan and sat by a river and near Mount Hermon or Hermon. And these are places that would not have been named Hermon or Dan during the time of Enoch. Dan is a tribe of Israel. Israel comes around after Abraham. Abraham is way after Noah. Noah is after Enoch. So we're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years between Enoch and the time that the tribe of Dan is going to be in the land of Israel, and Mount Hermon is going to be named. So he's talking about stuff that it couldn't possibly come from Enoch. It was obviously written much later. The Book of Enoch was obviously written during the time, a couple hundred years before Christ came, probably around 300 or so. BC, 200 to 300 BC. Our earliest copies of the Book of Enoch are 200, 300 BC. But it's interesting that our earliest copies of the Book of Enoch, that are whole copies, are going to be in translations of the Book of Enoch. It's hard to find a Hebrew copy of the Book of Enoch, which is interesting. It means we may very well be losing things in translation because we only have fragments of the Book of Enoch in Hebrew, and it was seems clearly to have been written in Hebrew. And that's what Joe's going to ask about now. How certain can we be about any book when it's been translated for us?
Hebrew to Latin to
Or
Greek.
Aramaic to
yeah,
English.
like how much of it?
And there's this
and
thing-
is it possible to?
It was translated from Hebrew to Latin to English. When we translate from English, we go back to the original texts. I'm not a translator, but when translators today translate from English, we don't go to Latin that was translated from the Hebrew. No, we go back to the Hebrew. We can reconstruct the Hebrew text. We know what was written there. We have the Masoretic text, which was a bit later, but it was a construction. We have all of these things. You can look deeper into it. But those are definitely true. We don't translate. We translate directly from Hebrew into English. We don't go Hebrew got translated into Latin and then Latin gets translated into English. That's not how we do it. That's not considered a very good translation because you are going to lose things in translation there.
Even understand what they're saying without understanding the language.
Now, this is what translation work is all about, expressing in another language what was originally said. So can you understand what they're saying without understanding the language? Yes, that's how translators do anything. Now, could there something have been lost in translation? Yeah, sure, that's possible. But the main meaning is what they're trying to convey in a translation, and that's what's happening. So you might find a few little details that are interesting that you find by studying a language, but the gist of it, the main body of content of a text is translated in a translate. That's what translators do. That's the whole point. Here's another clip about how the Bible was passed on by the telephone game. This is a really silly, not serious in the scholarly world kind of a argument, but it's passed around the internet. So let's hear what they have to say.
If you're playing the telephone game, you want to be second. You
Yeah,
don't want to be 15th.
Exactly.
Right? And whoever was writing it down the earliest, that's probably you're closer to their depictions of what that truth is than after King James starts f***ing around with it and all these
Want
other
a new
people,
wife, gotta remove
all
certain
these
stuff.
new people start getting involved.
All these people start getting involved. Everyone's messing it up. So we don't know what was originally written. We do know what was originally written in the Bible. I've actually done a whole series on this. If you guys want to check it out, I'll link the video in YouTube and other places. But we can tell what was originally written in the Bible. Even atheist agnostic scholars say, yeah, we might have some text where it's like maybe it was this word or maybe it was that word, but we know the meaning of the text. We know the meaning of that verse. We know maybe we come to a text like Luke 11 and we aren't sure if it's 70. I think it's Luke 12. If it's 70 disciples that Jesus sent out or 72 of them. But we do know that he sent out a group of either 70 or 72 disciples, and they went out and did this. We know the meaning of the text, even if we might miss a little detail in looking at what was originally written. We can actually tell what was originally written because of how it was copied. It was copied and sent over here, copied, sent over there, copied, sent over there. So as people make mistakes, we can compare the copies and get back to what was originally written because they're not all making the same mistakes. And so this is very interesting because we have embarrassingly high amount of copies of these things. It's embarrassment of wealth, they say, that we can actually find what was originally written. And no, King James did not change it because he wanted a new wife.
And actually, when I did my swearing in, I actually did my swearing in on the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible.
Wow.
It's cool. It's direct translation.
That's kind of crazy.
When she was sworn into office, she was sworn in on a Ethiopian Orthodox Bible because that's a direct translation. The Ethiopian Orthodox didn't come around until 300 years, 4th century, 300 years after Christ, and many, 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 many years after Enoch, thousands of years after Enoch. So a direct translation, there's no reason to say that. There's many reasons to say that's incorrect.
In my position officially, I've seen men pervert information to get what they want. So it's not unlikely that an entire, very secret, very truthful text was omitted in an effort to control population and to insert yourself between individuals' relationship between them directly and God. And I think that,
Well, especially if it doesn't agree with your interpretation
Whatever.
of God. I mean, and this is what the issue with these rabbis, right?
Yeah, I've seen people insert, but yeah, you've seen people pervert information, Anna Polina Luna, but here's the thing. Perversion of information can become by subtraction and addition. And it's clear all of the evidence points to the fact that the Ethiopian Orthodox canon is incorrect because it adds the Book of Enoch, because it adds to what is clearly Scripture, something that is clearly not Scripture. Rather, Anna Paulina Luna seems to think the only thing that can happen that could ever pervert the Bible is taking things away. There couldn't possibly be an addition. That maybe the conspiracy theory here is the Ethiopian Orthodox Church having added a book to the canon of Scripture. Guys, I know all of you are wondering about the book of Jude, because the book of Jude quotes the book of Enoch, they say. The book of Jude quotes something from the book that is recorded in the book of Enoch and says that Enoch said it, but that doesn't mean that the book of Enoch is correct. Just that it happens to record one thing that Enoch actually said. And in fact, the thing that is quoted in the book of Jude is also stated in Deuteronomy 33:2. So it's actually quoting from real Scripture, and saying that Enoch also said that, and just because it's happened to be written in the book of Enoch doesn't make the book of Enoch true, just because it has one thing that has to be true about the book of Enoch. The rest of it is extremely suspect and obviously doesn't belong in the Bible. That's what I have to say about that. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time right here on Point of View Scriptura.
We're about news, commentary, conversations, truth, liberty, and God. We stand for American values and our flag. We believe that the Constitution is a document that fortifies rights already given to us by our Creator. We will not apologize for our love of God and country, ever. We are Right America Media.